In the final part of this module, we will look at how we can now extend our form so that it will also support validation. We basically get validation for free with the built-in Blazor edit form and input components. However, there are a few steps we need to follow in order for validation to work. First, by default, validations can be easily added using data annotations. We can also use other options here, but to keep things simple, we will rely on data annotations. If you don't know what they are, I'll show you them in the next slide. Next, Blazor comes with the data annotations validator, a component, of course, which is used to bring support for validations based on data annotations. We'll simply need to add that into our edit form. As said, if you want to do another type of validation, you'll need to write custom validation here. Finally, the third building block to enable validation is the validation summary. This component will give you an overview, a summary of all validation errors we have in our edit form. Here you can see data annotations being added to our entities. We have the last name property of the employee class, and it's decorated with two validation attributes, the so-called data annotations. The required data annotation will make this property required. So should we try to submit the form without the value entered in the bound input component, this attribute will cause a validation error. Similarly, the string length will make sure that the entered value's length is not longer than 50 characters, perhaps because of a constraint in the database. Optionally, when adding the data annotation, we can also pass in an error message, as we can see here. This can even be localized if working with a multi-language application. For the data annotation validation support to work, we need to add the data annotations validator. Simply drop this in the edit form and things will be alright. The result is that validation will trigger when the user taps out of the field and when there are validation errors in the form. Submitting the form won't trigger the handle valid submit. Now, validation errors won't be visualized automatically. Instead, we need to bring in the validation summary. That will render by default a list of all error messages that we have in the form.